Hi everybody, welcome to Missy's Imaginings. I apologize for my voice. I don't know what's going on with it. Yeah, it's just froggy and scratchy, and so we'll make the best of it today. But in the video today, we're going to look at sewing the ball gown pattern for the pear-shaped smart doll body. So the main thing that we're going to tackle today in making this ball gown is some tricks that I want to apply, because if you have watched the video when we drafted the patterns are all cut with a curve on a bias cut, which means the stretch is going to go both directions because of the way the curve is on the hem and the waist. So you can't have a straight grain come down the length of the skirt, because this edge of the skirt is not straight with the grain. So therefore you end up with a bias cut at some point. But when I make this gown, I want to use a beautiful border lace fabric that I found. And so in order to keep a border fabric, you have to cut straight. So what we're going to look at today is how you can take a straight cut on a border and use it even though you're sewing something that has a bias cut curve. And it's not rocket science by any means, but it does allow a little bit of a cheat to go ahead and use these really pretty fabrics that have a print or a hem or an embossing embroidery along one edge, that you want that to be your hemline. And so we're going to look at how to do that today. Most of the other parts of the gown have been done in other videos. We've put bustiers together, we've put other ball gowns together. The other parts are going to be very similar in that it's just a bodice shape, and then there's going to be some ruched lace on the front, which is similar to what we've done before. But I thought it might be worth doing the video just to see how we're going to navigate using this beautiful border fabric and maintain that border even though we have a curved piece. So that's what we're going to look at today on how to do that. And it ends up being simpler than you might think. But it might take a little bit of time because you'll have to do some math, which, don't be scared, it's not like, calculus or anything, but there is going to be a little bit of calculating involved in manipulating the length at the waist to get it to fit on what we're going to be doing for our gown underdress. So there we go, that's what we're doing today. So we'll go ahead and switch angles on the camera and then kind of get started. The first thing we're going to look at is putting together the main part of the underdress. So this would be the front piece, front and side, so it's cut on a fold. So here's the fold. So the first step I'm going to do is to attach the side back pieces to the sides of the front piece. So I'm going to be attaching just those side seams here and here, and I'll sew those together, and then I will also run them through my serger or overlock machine to finish out those edges, because those would be visible on the inside. The reason I'm going to do that is I want to be able to get that seam done and then have an accurate measurement of what is left when those seams are done and the seam allowances have been accounted for this measurement of how much fabric I have at the waistline. So that's what I want to do first. I want to do these side seams so that I can measure this distance right here. With the sides now sewn, I can take and measure from one side around. Here we go. And it doesn't have to be super, super, super exact, but I've got 9. That's one side, so we double that, so we've got 18 inches of length at the waist. So now our challenge is going to be on our lace. We have this piece as well as these pieces. So we have the 2 side back pieces, and then we have the front piece that was also cut on a fold, just like we did the main pink pieces here. So now I'm going to attach the side back pieces to the front side pieces on the raw edge, and then I'm going to go ahead and finish that off as well. Then our next step is going to be deciding how we're going to reduce all of this length down to 18 inches. In inspecting my fabric, I found there's a slight flaw, a hole right here in my lace. Let's see if we can, I guess this is brown on both sides. Okay, it's right there. And to fix this, what I'm going to do is an attempt. I'm going to use a single piece of thread. I'm not going to double my thread, and we'll see if this works. But I'm just going to tuck this these little edges together with just that one thread. I don't want it to be too bulky. And I know it won't show up too horribly because I've got pink underneath it as well, so that will help camouflage the thread. But I really don't want to have a hole on my lace right here, so all I'm going to do is take that piece of thread and get rid of my needle and pull this piece here so it's nice and closed, not too bulky. Then I'm going to use some fray check and hopefully this will come out. Just going to put a little bit of fray check on there. Now we'll have to get the lid back on. Okay. There. Then do a light tap, and then I'm going to let that dry, and then once it's dry I'll trim off these other little threads. But that's just how I'm going to mend that hole in my lace, because I don't want a big hole right there in the front of the gown. So on top of the pink, lay it over the pink. It won't be that noticeable over the pink. It kind of blends in really well. So we'll let that dry and then we'll continue with our plan. So the total length of my lace is about 100 inches. So I need to reduce this 100 inches down to, let's say, like 40 inches. Which gives me a difference of 60. So that means I need to take out about 60 inches of this length and shrink down this edge. So what I'm going to try doing is to space out in 30 spaces of dartage, if that's a word, from 2 inches, because I've got, wherever I fold it, it's going to be 1 inch wide, which accounts for 2 inches of length of fabric, down to probably halfway to make a dart and then I will trim out that excess fabric. And if I do that in 30 places, then that should reduce this top edge by 60 inches. So that will be about 40 inches of length that I will gather to match this. So there still will be more fabric of the lace than this fabric, but it will get rid of a lot of the bulk if I had chosen to gather this entire length of 100 inches, because that would put a lot of bulk on this waist that I don't want that much bulk. And because this is straight, I kind of have a skirt. Sorry again for my voice. My skirt pieces are going to fall like this. But if I gather all of this lace, my gathering for my tool is going to gather like this. So I want to reduce that bulk to where my gathering of the lace is more like this than like this, by reducing that bulk, since my skirt is like this. I hope that makes sense. So I have pattern pieces that give a drape like this. If I gather something that's just a straight rectangle, it's going to look like this, because all that bulk is still up at the top. So I'm going to reduce that by putting in darts and trimming off excess fabric so that it'll give more of a rounded shape, more of a bell shape, as opposed to this kind of a shape. So it will more naturally follow the drape of the original skirt. So that's what we're going to try doing. So once I get the pins in place, we'll kind of take a look at it before I sew the darts. Here is the pinned edge. So I found the center of the front, and I've done 1 inch dart gather, or not gathers, but pinch out 1 inch at 2-inch intervals. So every 2 inches from the center, I folded back 1 inch of fabric and pinned it. So this is where each dart is going to be, and it ended up that half of my length went to 24 inches. With that amount of darts, and I think I'm going to be happy with that. So it will still have some puff at the waist, but that's going to get rid of, let's see, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11. Is that right? 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 times 2 is 22. Times 2 is 44. That's going to get rid of 44 inches of bulk off of that waistband that needs to be gathered. So when I do each of these darts, I'll probably start at one end just because it's easier then to manipulate the fabric. I'm going to just lay my fabric down at the machine and start at the pin and then sew an angled dart to about half of the distance of this length that will be the length of the overlay. So from here about to here, I'm going to go ahead and sew that dart in. Then I'll run that through the serger just so that I can cut off the excess fabric. So what I'm doing is removing that amount of fabric. So once I have all of those sewn in and then serged, then I'll go ahead and come back to the camera and we can take a look at how it changed from just a long rectangle and to get more of an angled result at my waistband. Not really angled as much as this is curved, but reduced is what I want to say. So the amount of gathering that will be done will be a lot less fabric bulked up at the waistband. And now we have all the darts sewn in place and all the excess taken off. So now you can kind of see how the bottom edge is a lot bigger than the waist edge. So it gives it that curve that we want. So now when I gather that waist edge, I've gotten rid of a lot of the bulk of that fabric, and I will have a drape that matches what I want over that overskirt. So now that this is ready, oh, and it took a long time. That's a lot of little seams. But we'll kind of hold it up because that way you can kind of see the seams in there better. They don't go all the way to the pretty edge. They just go kind of about down to here. So over the pink fabric, it'll look like this. And once it's gathered, it'll help even hide those a little bit more. But that will maintain that beautiful scalloped edge that came on the edge of that lace, which is what I really, really wanted to save. And looks like I've got a little neck here. And so yeah, so that's how you can use a border fabric even though you want that bias curve. So that's what we're going to do on this part. The next part of our skirt will involve putting the ruffle onto the actual underskirt. So I have the ruffle pieces ready, and they are also cut on that same fold. So now we'll take all of these ruffle pieces and sew them together end to end, and then gather this top inside curve edge to match the length of the curve of our underskirt. So that's just going to be a lot of straight sewing, not anything that interesting. But once I do the edges together, then I'll do 2 rows of basting along that inside edge so that when I gather it, I've got 2 rows of stitching to pull against. And yeah, we'll just start gathering that edge to make the ruffle that will fit on here. I'll also serge or overlock the hem so that I can turn that up just 1/4 of an inch, because since it's curved on the outside, when you try to hem that, you're going to have extra fabric. So by having a very small hem, it minimizes how much possibility there is for that to pleat when you try to hem it. So it's just going to be a very minimal hem, 1/4 inch. So I'll serge that edge and hem that as well. And then we'll kind of come back once this part is put together. So we'll get that much done and then come take a look. Now that all my ruffle has been hemmed and the pieces are all sewn together, I decide how to attach this to the skirt. I want to section it off. So when I cut my pieces, I had to deal with the amount of fabric I had available and how the pieces were placed. So I ended up with 2 pieces that were the length of the pattern piece itself that were not cut on a fold. Then I ended up with the ability to cut 3 long pieces on a fold so that they're the long length, so the doubled length. So I have 3 of those, and then I have the other one that's just the length of the piece on this side. So essentially on my skirt, if I divide it into quadrants, the front piece will have 2 quadrants. So here's the center front that was cut on a fold. So that will have essentially 2 quadrants here. So I'm going to, on the fold, I'm going to put a small notch so I know where the center front is. So I'm going to match up my seams here and line up my hem, because I want my ruffles to be balanced all the way around and not have like a lot of weird ruffle in a weird spot. So I know this is the center front where my notch is. Then my seams will be the marking of the next quadrant. So I've got space here, 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 and here. So there's 4 sections to the upper part of the skirt. So now I'm going to divide the ruffle into 4 sections as well. So I'll have this one that's individual, and then I'll have half of the next big curve. That will make 1 quadrant. Then I have the second half of that big curve, and the first half of the center curve. That will be the second quadrant. And I have pins to mark those spaces. So then I have the second half of that curve with the first half of the next curve. That'll be a quadrant. Then I'm going to have the second part of that curve with the last piece that will be the fourth. So by having my pins to divide those sections, the pins will match up to the side seams and the center front when I place it onto the skirt. So now comes the very, very tedious task of gathering fabric. So this is just, like I say, long and tedious. My preference is to take the top 2 threads on the right side of the fabric and hold those taut while I gather. Some people prefer the bobbin threads. I like the top threads just because when I gather, I'm going to have less thread on the front side than the back side. And so if some shows, once I put those together, it's easier to remove because it's going to be tight, it's going to be easy to see, and it's going to be easy to snip and get out of there. Whereas the back side, we'll take a minute here. I'm just going to see, I'm just pulling that along those basting stitches for the gathers. On the back side, your thread is going to be going because it's the same length as your fabric, and that is harder to pull out because it's going in and out, whereas this is going to be just where the tension lies. And in my experience, I find it easier to remove this top thread than the curved thread. So I always gather on the top or the right side of the fabric, just because if some shows, it's easier to remove later. So now comes the fun of gathering. So I'm going to be working towards the center and just gently pulling that fabric along those 2 strands of thread. And this is why I always do 2 strands of basting thread, so that if you get this whole thing all gathered and then one of your thread breaks, oh my goodness, if you've only got 1 piece of thread, you have to start and do it all over again. So I always do 2 because it's just a little security measure for me. Plus I think it helps the seam allowance to lay a little bit nicer. So I'm going to gather from one end to the center of the ruffle, and once I get this all gathered up to where I'm not dealing with as much length, then I'll start gathering or moving the gathers rather to fit the top edge of my, or the hem edge of my skirt piece. So now I'm still moving along for this half. So I'm just going to keep doing this, and oh, I don't want to lose that pin. I want that one there. And then once I kind of get ready to pin it on the skirt, we'll take a look at it. Okay, so here we have everything all gathered, and we've got tons of thread here. That's what I've been pulling on to gather this. So now with right sides together, I'm going to match up all my quadrants and adjust the gathers to fit the hemline of the skirt. So here's my right side to the right side. Let's see if we show it on camera okay. Alright, so here's the center of my ruffle and the center of my skirt. Woo! I'm grabbing the camera. We're going crazy. Alright, so we're going to match up this position and we're going to pin this. There we go. Then I'm going to go to the side seam for where the outside pin here is. And I'm going to match that pin to the side seam. There we go. Then I'm going to match this pin to this side seam. And I know those positions need to stay in the same spot. I may even in a minute put safety pins in those positions. So now what I can do is I can start lengthening the ruffle to match the hem, and I'll probably go ahead and now that those pins are in place, I'll find the center of each section and kind of mark that as well. And that way I know that's going to be where that seam of my ruffle meets up for this section. So I can put a pin here, and that will allow that gather to be even. And then I can loosen the gathers to fit this edge. So I'm just going to start kind of loosening it, and making sure my gathers are even. Just kind of shuffling them to the side and gently pulling, and loosening those. So working with gathers is just a lot of time. It's very time consuming. So I'm just loosening slowly, but I want to keep my gathers even. Then give a little pull. Okay, and it looks like it's getting close to matching. Okay, now with these gathers kind of separated so that they're kind of even, I need some more towards the center there. Shuffle some of that over. Okay, that's approximately the center. So we'll put a pin in this one. And when you pin, I'm trying to only pin on where the seam allowance would be, because I don't want to catch my ruffle and pleat my ruffle. So I'm going to kind of watch for that. Then in this little section, move some over. Okay, make sure I'm still in the view of the camera there. Alright, so we'll put a couple pins in this little section. And one here. Kind of watch how the fabric folds. I'll put another pin here. Alright, so then we're getting it together. So we're going to do this for the entire length of the hem. Just adjusting all those gathers in place. And this one I might need to shuffle a little bit over this way. There we go. That's better. Okay, one here. And so I'll continue that activity, working from the center out towards the end of this side, then the center out towards the end of this side. And then once it's all pinned in place. We'll pull that taut. I want the skirt part to be flat. I don't want any wrinkles in this part of the skirt, so that will hang flat. And then when I send this through the sewing machine, I'm going to put the ruffles down, because that helps, the feed dogs will help feed those gathers through with less chance of a lot of weird puckering. They just kind of help even that out. So that's what we're doing next, is we're getting the ruffle adjusted. And so now see, we have this big buckle here. So now we're going to go ahead and I'm going to grab a hold here and gently pull. And that's why you don't trim your threads too early because you're going to have to loosen up to fit. We'll loosen this. And so we've still got all that thread that we've pulled to gather on, but we're going to come back a little bit so we can fit to our skirt. But I always rather have it over gathered and then loosen it to fit than trying to increase my gathers once I've already started pinning. For me, it's just easier to do it that way. It probably depends on just what you're used to doing and what your preference is and how your hands work. But for me, I like to get it a little over tight, and then I can just pull gently to loosen as I need to adjust to whatever straight edge or flat edge I should say, that I'm going to be attaching it to. So now we can go ahead and adjust our gathers to meet this edge and pin that on as well. So that's my process. If you have an easier way that you like to do gathers, feel free to leave that down in the comments below and share that information, because I love that we can share tips and tricks and ideas to make sewing easier and to help people who are just starting out and learning things and trying new things. So we want to share that knowledge. And yeah, so if you have any ideas or tips on the way you like to do gathers, go ahead and put that down there. And yeah, strike up a conversation and enjoy that camaraderie as we work on putting things together. So I will get this all gathered, or not gathered, but all adjusted and put onto the hemline and sewn on. Then I will run this edge through the overlock machine, through the serger, just to make sure I've got finished fabric here. I don't want any rough edges or raw edges of fabric. Oh, I keep hitting the string that's holding my camera. Sorry, I'm sending you guys bouncing around. But yeah, so anyway, this is the tedious part of doing a lot of ruffles, and I don't know of any other fast way to get it done, but there we go. And then I'll just kind of, again, I'm just tugging gently on the skirt part so that I know the skirt part is all gonna lay flat, and then the only pleats or only tucks will be in my ruffle, not on the straight edge. So now I'll just do this last part of the end, and then I'll go do the other side. So a lot of fabric, a lot of shuffling, but that's how I do a ruffle and how I fit it on. And yeah, when we get that part done, we'll look at the next step. now all the ruffle is sewn on. Phew! So now you'll be able to see where I had that extra bit of thread for my gathering. Now that it's straight, it's all one piece of thread, and so it's a lot easier now to remove that than it would be if that thread was all rumpled inside. So now I can look through anywhere it shows and just pull that out, and it's going to be a lot easier to do that. So because I have one, my seam allowance was a little smaller than I thought, so that's okay. So now I can snip here, take this one out, and then just keep removing. So that way it's a lot easier to remove this basting, in my opinion, if it's just all right there on the top and easy to grab, easy to pull it right out. So I can just grab it and pull it right out. Like so. So now that I have all the ruffles on the skirt, I will go ahead and overlock that seam allowance just so that it's nice and finished on the inside. So here we go. This is just one long strand, so it'll take a bit to pull the whole thing out. But see how easy that is to get that out? Where if it was the other side, it would look all rumpled like this. But see, now on the other side, I can just, ooh, shake it again. I can just lift it off. And it's real simple to do that too. So, yeah. So I'm going to remove that one bit of basting that we can see from the front. And once I get that done, I'll go ahead and I'll run this edge through the overlock serger machine, and then I will press everything up towards the skirt, or will I? Yeah, I'll probably press it up towards the skirt, just so it lays a little bit nicer, I think. So I'll continue my little progress here. And then we'll go ahead and start working on the bodice section. Here is the ruffle all attached. I went ahead and did serging on the back center seam because I know that when I put that together, those edges are going to be showing inside the skirt. So I wanted them to be finished fabric as well. And then I pressed the ruffle so that it hangs nice. So here is the underskirt pretty much completed, and then my overskirt I need to go ahead and do basting along the top edge, but we can gather and take a look at approximately what this will look like when it's on the skirt. So this is what our ball gown's going to look like. So we're going to have that ruffle poking out underneath, and then the overlay of the skirt will be like this. So far I like it. I think it's going to be cute. So let's go ahead and take a look at the bodice pieces. Alright, so we have this piece, which will be sewn just like a little tube and then turned right side out, and then it will be ruched in certain locations according to this and sewn on the bodice at the top as a decorative finish. This piece I'm going to baste down both sides, and this is the longer piece that looks like this, and then I'm going to match it to this length here. So this is going to overlay the front piece, but the edges will be gathered to match that. And my little center point here at this edge is where this will be gathered down to here and here. So here's my little kind of marking spot. And here. So this will have lace overlay. Then we're going to sew on our pieces. Get this out of the way for a moment. On each side, so that we have this piece. And then, let's see, this is our center back. So then we're going to have this piece will be sewn here and here. Make sure that's showing up all right. Okay. Then we'll have the center back piece will be sewn here and here. And then we have pieces to repeat that whole process. So this will be all the lining, and this will be the outside that will have the lace sewn on here. Now, if you want to add any more embellishment, that's totally up to you. But this is the only piece I'm going to be adding lace to, just the very front. So I'll be gathering these edges, putting it on here, then sewing these all together in this order. So that will create kind of like a long, elongated bustier top, so to speak, that will be the top bodice part of the gown. And then the skirt will be sewn to this edge at the waist here. So when I gather the waistline of the underskirt, and then as the overlay skirt as well, it's going to be matching this bottom edge of the bodice. Now the front part of the bodice is done, and the lining or facing is finished. So now with the right sides together, I'm going to sew these two pieces together, and I'm just going to sew up the center back across the top edge and then down the center back on the other side. But I'm going to leave this part open because this is what's going to be sewn up to the skirt. So I'll go up and around there, and then once I have that ready, I'm going to gather, let's bring all of our pieces here again. I'm going to gather the lace skirt, and it will be sewn on first because it's the overlay, and then I'll gather it to match this edge. Then I'll gather the waist edge of the underskirt and sew it on as well, because I don't want these two to be attached to each other, because that way they'll fall separately from one another. So that's my next steps to start putting the dress together. Here is what we have done so far. So the overskirt is all sewed on. So we did the lace overskirt to the bodice first. Then I sewed on the pink layer to the bodice. So that's all been sewn underneath. When I sewed it on, I did take a little over a seam allowance, so maybe like close to a 1/2 inch, maybe 3/8 of an inch of the edge, and went past the side seam so that I can in turn flip that towards the bodice. So when I go ahead and turn this under and start to hand stitch the lining in place, that's going to make this edge turn in towards the inside of the garment. But they're separate layers. So that's what I wanted to do. I wanted separate layers. So that's going to turn in on the finished garment like this, because I kept that, I didn't take it right to the edge because I want this to be able to fold over, so that on the finished edge you won't see the serging, you'll just see folded fabric. So I did that on both sides. So this edge also extends just a little bit beyond that side seam. You can kind of see how it extends beyond the side seam. And then on the outside, we'll take a look here. So this edge extends beyond, or the center back seam, I'm sorry, the center back seam here and here. So then I can fold it in towards the inside of the garment, and then I will hand stitch the bodice lining in place like this. So once that's done, I'm going to start with I'll hand stitch that, then with right sides together, I'm going to sew from the hemline up to probably about, let's see, maybe 3 inches down from the bodice. Because this is for the Pear, she has wider hips and a wider little tummy, so I want to make sure that her body can get through this opening. So I'll probably grab the doll and just make sure she can go through the opening to determine how far up from the hem I sew the skirt. But I'll do the pink layer, then I'll do the lace layer, because I want the skirt to fall separately. I don't want this seam attached in the back. I don't want this one seam. I want this skirt to fall separately from the pink skirt. So once I get the bodice done, then I'll go ahead and do those back seams of the skirt. But once again, I'll do them separate. So I'll do the pink one, and then I'll do the lace one, and I'll fit it on the doll to make sure that there's enough of an opening to fit the doll through. Then the back would close like this, and the only parts that will be connected of the two skirts is right here. And so then these will fold in like so, and then hang separately from one another. So then we'll have a flouncy pretty skirt on our ball gown. And then the last thing we'll need to do is the decorative part at the top that's going to just decorate the top and go around the shoulders. And so we'll kind of see how we want to put that on. And here is our finished little gown with the bodice all dressed up. And we did the little ruching on the neck piece in the spots indicated on the pattern pieces. And then so it creates kind of like a choker neckline, and then comes around to the back. And then we did embellish with some little rose ribbons. There we go, at all the gathered spots, and then at the back as well. On the front, I did 3 in the center, then 3 little ribbon roses with some extra ribbons on the front, and 2 little roses here. So this is how the gown turns out. Let's see, now we've got the stand kind of in the way, but I can still lift this up to where you can see that the back is not connected at that back center seam, so that the skirt, the overskirt, is free to fall loosely over that overskirt. So we just have a little bit where the opening is here, where those pieces kind of come and overlap a little. And then I may need to move the one snap. I forgot to take into account where the stand needs to go into her back. But here we'll go ahead and move that forward. So here's a view of the back. So yes, all in all, I am very happy with how it turned out. And this is actually going to be a gift for my daughter. She has a mini me smart doll. And so this is the rest of a very, very late Christmas gift. But it is all finished, and so if you are interested in making the ball gown pattern for the Smart Doll pear-shaped body. This is how it turns out if you sew it all exactly as it is. If you want, of course, you can lengthen that underskirt down to the length and forego all this ruffle if you don't want to mess with all that gathering of the ruffle and putting it on there, but that's just how it was designed, so I put it together that way. And then if you are using a border fabric, you can also take that the complete length if you wish. So there's lots of variations that you can add to the gown. And of course, if you want, you don't have to take out that extra bulk. You could have more gathers around the waist, but just because it's a doll size, I just didn't want this seam right here to be extremely bulky, given that we have 2 layers of fabric and both are gathered. So that's why I wanted to take out a lot of the bulk and still use this border fabric. Sorry about my voice again, it's just kind of a mess, but that's how the gown turns out. And have fun with that pattern. If you have any additional questions or anything that I wasn't real clear about, you can always leave that in the comments. I try to get to my comments and respond as often as I can and as much as I can. So yeah, there we go. Happy sewing, and I'll see you next time. Bye.